Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today, Solidarity Friday. This episode is being released on April 16th. Michelle, how's it going today?
Very good, Kyle. How are you doing?
Doing well. We're just waiting for Joe to get here as well. So while we wait, we'll start to dig in. So a reminder to everybody, we have our next group of Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. It's kicking off May 20th. We have two groups there. One starts at 2 p.m. Eastern. The other one starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'd love to have you. It's a nice kind of hybrid course. Get tons of pre-recorded material, interviews, and then you can join us on Zoom for an hour and a half for the 8 weeks to talk about all the topics, get into little nuances, and really dig deeper into the topics. And I don't think we ever really mentioned this, but there's also a project that comes along with the course. So we really encourage people to dig into their own integration process. And I always love that part of the class, seeing what people come up with. So if you want to learn more, check it out at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. You can click Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. We also have another option up there. It's called the Independent Learner. And that's just pretty much the same content, just doesn't come with the live supported classes. So if you're interested in just getting the material, you can check that out as well. And also check out some of our other classes up there with the Shadow and Psychedelics class. Really enjoyed putting that on with Ido Cohen. And then also if you want to dive into the Jungian aspects, Johanna Hilla put together Imagination as Revelation. So again, check that out, psychedeliceducationcenter.com, and be sure to subscribe to us on all your podcast platforms, wherever you listen to. So, all right, Joe's here. We're going to kick things off. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
Wonderful.
That's nice. All right, Michelle, do you want to kick things off in the news updates in the cannabis and psychedelic world?
Yeah, absolutely. We have another round of exciting updates this week. So first off, a Maine lawmaker, Representative Ann Perry, filed a bill to decriminalize the possession of all drugs. Really exciting stuff. And the Marijuana Moment reported that this bill would make the possession of a controlled substance a civil penalty punishable by a $100 fine without the threat of jail time. And if a person is unable to pay the fine, it could be waived if they underwent a health assessment, which can involve a referral to a, substance misuse treatment. I love how Marijuana Moment uses misuse there. And it also says, additionally, the proposal stipulates that people who seek out medical assistance for the anti-overdose medication naloxone, either for their own behalf or another person, could not be subject to arrest or prosecution, which is great. It's honestly kind of hard to believe that Narcan is still illegal in some places when it could save lives. So
I had no idea.
I know.
It's so weird.
Right? But I guess in lawmakers' mind, having it available could, encourage drug use, but obviously not. We're just trying to keep people alive out here. So so that's really exciting. And then also, this was another big week for cannabis legalization. New Mexico yesterday, the governor signed a bill to legalize recreational cannabis. Really exciting stuff. And 2 days ago, Virginia became the first southern state to legalize cannabis. So it's all happening. I can't believe it. I'm so excited. I literally can't believe this is a reality, but I'm thrilled.
It's exciting to see this, Virginia and the South start to get on board, because I feel like that's probably going to be the slowest to adapt some of these. But I don't know, maybe not. It's pretty sweet to see that.
They have been, right?
Yeah.
The South is one of the last places to start legalizing rec cannabis. So I just can't wait to see who follows, maybe North Carolina, maybe Texas. Let's see. I'm excited.
And it's nice to see that Virginia is authorizing home grow up to 4 plants per household beginning July 1st.
Wow.
I see all these other states being able to offer this besides New Jersey. So
There's no home growing in Jersey?
No. So part of the reason was they wanted to, I guess they're afraid that people home growing is going to disrupt the, the legal market. And it's, I think, the only state that doesn't allow any sort of home cultivation because, New Jersey.
Not cool though, New Jersey. Yeah, I mean, I really hope that I mean, the rec market isn't even up yet, right? But I hope that eventually that can change. I wonder if there's any activists working to change it.
There
There
are.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, there's a bill getting drafted right now for home grow. It'll just be interesting to see if Murphy will pass it, because they did make statements that they wanted to just get, their sales up and running, and they were afraid that home grow would, throw that off.
Yeah, interesting. It is exciting with Virginia allowing it so soon because, I mean, this was one of the first states that was like growing hemp in the 1700s, right? Like Virginia has a great climate for farming, so really
and 3 years
exciting.
ahead of schedule. I think they were supposed to do this in 2024, and they kind of expedited it, which is nice.
That's fantastic. So, the economic boons as tobacco use decreases, which it will decrease. I hope it never totally goes away, because I kind of like tobacco here and there. But it's going to decrease in use, and cannabis should increase in use, and the land will, the whole hemp, like the hemper thing. Who is the Jack Harrer, Emperor Wears No Clothes kind of deal? Like hemp can be used for so many things. It's almost like I don't like talking about it anymore because you sound crazy, but it's very true.
And it's faster to grow for fiber and stuff than trees. It just takes one season to grow hemp plants. Trees take like 20 years, these kinds of things.
It's inappropriate to be killing forests when we could have a totally fine alternative there. I know that's scary to some people, but forests need to be preserved. We need them to live. And then, regarding the Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado triangle, it now makes my road trips a lot less risky and pleasurable. So I'm really excited about that when I drive to Phoenix. So it's fantastic. And once the South realizes that they need this new crop, and the crop is really desired and there's no risks, all of the political posturing should go away. I would imagine economics is usually behind these kind of stances, prison lobbies, et cetera. And they're like, oh, look, we could actually make real money through ag because we've got great growing,
especially
skills.
It's so important in the South also because, it has way more like Black majority population. And so, it could really help in a social justice way to legalize marijuana in the South. Less people will get arrested. Their car smells like marijuana. It won't be a reason to search vehicles and people to get in these really dangerous situations with cops. And so I'm really excited. I hope the rest of the South follows suit little by little. Faster than, I want it to happen faster, actually. No. But yeah, it's great.
Well, things are speeding up, right?
They are.
Pretty wild.
I know, it's crazy. It's so exciting. So congratulations, Virginia. I want to see more states in the South do this as well. And looks shaping up to be a pretty fun summer. I don't know.
So back to New Mexico real quick, Michelle.
Sure.
Did it mention when it would be implemented? There could be rec sales or anything, or is that still being worked out?
I have to do some more reading. I actually just read about it right before we signed on. So I cannot say for sure, but I'm sure some listeners will know by Friday and they can tell us.
Right on.
But I don't know.
All right. So next up, what do we've got?
Next up, I wanted to talk about this new scientific study that just came out about psilocybin and creativity. This study is called Spontaneous and Deliberate Creative Cognition During and After Psilocybin Exposure. This article just came out on the 8th of April, and it's making waves in the psychedelic community because it's really exciting. I think, so basically it proves, for the first time scientifically that psilocybin can, increase creativity even after the sessions ended. And so the abstract here explains that, following a double-blind, placebo-controlled parallel group design, we demonstrated that psilocybin induced a time and construct-related differentiation of effects on creative thinking. Acutely, psilocybin increased ratings of spontaneous creative insights while decreasing deliberate task-based creativity, which makes sense. But for me, the most interesting finding is that 7 days after psilocybin, the number of novel ideas increased, which that is kind of like what I've been stuck on. Like, yeah, obviously during the psilocybin experience, you think of things in a new way. But the fact that 7 days later, they found that participants were able to, think of more novel ideas proves that there's something long lasting happening to the brain and like flexibility and creativity with psilocybin. So, really, really an exciting study. It's super cool. I wonder what you guys thought of that one.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I was just talking to Laura Dawn last night, who was on the show, a little bit about creativity and problem solving. And it just comes back to something our teacher Lenny has kind of told us over the years in a discussion he had with Stan Groff many years ago when the research was kind of coming back online. And I remember Lenny saying, "Hey, Stan, isn't this great? Like all this research is happening." And Stan just said, a lot of it's been done before within like the clinical domain. Obviously not meeting today's standards and they were operating a little bit differently, but for the most part, they were doing a lot of clinical research on mental health disorders. But Stan said, I think the real potential here with psychedelics lies within creativity. And like, I'm guessing also artistic expression and novel ideas as well. So that's something Joe and I have been really interested in. And, we bring this up pretty often just about the, we need novel creative ideas to help solve some of these problems that we're facing on a much larger scale. So, being able to have tools like this and also exciting just to, see that they're starting to push through some of the more clinical mental health disorders and start to explore some of these novel use cases of psychedelics, which I'm excited about. And in this article, they're mentioning like Carrie Mullis with the discovery of PCR, and some of these other people that used psychedelics for kind of creative problem solving. So there's potential, I think.
Another interesting part about this too is the participants weren't psychedelic naive, but they hadn't used a psychedelic in 3 months, which to me is really important because sometimes when I read these studies, more on the mental health, like, psilocybin for depression, I fear that like it only worked because they were totally psychedelic naive. And of course, such a extreme experience was going to change their outlook. But what about the rest of us who use psychedelics a few times a year? Like, can we still benefit from these kinds of things? And this study is showing that, like, that doesn't matter. It's not about like a first time use thing, which I think is really cool. And then I also kind of wondered when I read this study, I was like, well, what was this study for, right? And it is part of a larger trial assessing the effects of psilocybin on creativity, cognitive flexibility, brain connectivity, and glutamate concentrations. And so I guess I also started wondering when I was reading the article, like, did the participants go in with like the intention to be more creative? And did that make them more creative? But because it's placebo controlled and they are also like doing all these brain scans, that they are finding there's like statistically significant creativity increases in the psilocybin group. So it's really exciting, these kinds of like measures. And the last really interesting bit about this study is there was 256 participants, I'm pretty sure. Oh, no, wait, that's the ayahuasca study we're going to talk about. Never mind. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. But it's still a really interesting study. And it instead of like looking specifically at mental health things, it's just looking at creativity and flexibility, which of course is beneficial for mental health, but it's not going in with those same priming intentions. And so I found that really interesting.
The creativity stuff is so essential, and these research projects are wildly important. And bridging in a link Mike threw at us, I think a listener threw this over. It was from DNI, Department of National Intelligence, apparently put this report together. On page 30, it starts, kind of recapping a lot of what we talked about for, I think the listener said 35% of the last podcast was kind of on this kind of doomer climate stuff. And it's important. Like, human creativity kind of got us here. Human creativity can get us out. And psychedelics can play a huge role in that if we figure out how to leverage it properly. And, let's not use this thing, this stuff to help us get more oil out of the ground or pump more, fresh water into plastic bottles, single-use plastic bottles. Let's use it to solve this crisis. And yeah, just worth noting this particular listener. Let me pull up the name. Brent hit us up saying that, we were spot on that analysis about water and climate and migration and all this crazy stuff. And the poor people are going to get hit the worst. So we need to really buckle down in our position of privilege and see if we can't spend our time and resources solving these big problems and, developing centers where we can do this work and train people on how to do it outside of these centers. Mushrooms are cheap. Human creativity is really scarce in the universe, and we really need to treasure it and honor it and foster it. Yeah, so the results are durable too, right? We need more data to really prove that. Because I've been hearing things from people suggesting that the effects from a psilocybin, therapy session might only be 6 weeks. But I'm like, I don't know. I tend to think it's a little bit more durable than that. But it's also not as cut and dry as, sick and fixed, right? It's more of a continuum. Yeah. So I don't know. I love the creativity topic. It's one thing I'm most passionate about here in this space. So
yeah,
thanks for bringing this one up.
I was just looking again. It looks like there's 6 healthy participants, and they, to meet the requirement, they couldn't have used psychedelics within 3 months of the study there. But something else that's pretty interesting. So obviously a small sample size, and hopefully we are able to do larger studies in the future on this. But something else just in the conclusion here, kind of bringing it back to the therapy aspect, I find this to be really interesting. They said subacutely, patients may then be able to integrate these insights with a therapist and come up with new and more effective strategies that facilitate adaptive interpretation and coping skills. Yeah. Interesting, just kind of on the therapy aspect of bringing maybe, these creative insights or novel ideas to therapy, and just thinking about the integration process. How do you start to work through those ideas, those insights, and maybe, come up with, new methods of moving forward, integrating the experience. So.
Absolutely. Or just thinking about yourself and your life and your place in this world in a new way after a powerful psilocybin experience can help you approach everyday activities differently and approach how you think about yourself. I think so much of what's depression in Americans is all about our mindset and how, and our expectations and how we approach our lives. And if, a strong psilocybin experience or a few or once a year or whatever works for the individual can help kind of reset that and help them approach things in a healthier, more productive way. Hell yeah, I think it's really exciting. So similarly, that's a tough one. There's another new study. This one came out last month on 23rd of March in Scientific Reports. It's called Examining Changes in Personality Following Shamanic Ceremonial Use of Ayahuasca. And this is also a really interesting study. Now, this was I want to explain a little bit about how they did this study. So basically, they gave folks at 3 different ayahuasca healing retreats in South and Central America self-report measures on, the 5-factor model of personality traits. But they also gave informants. So I think it's probably loved ones, these same measures of the other person, so they could also try to assess any personality changes that wasn't self-reported, that's from someone close to them, to try to, balance out any placebo or expectation effects in these self-report assessments. And so they did find personality changes in these folks who were at these ayahuasca retreats. And this is the one where they gave these surveys to 256 different participants in these 3 retreat centers. And, right in the abstract of this article, it says the most pronounced change was a reduction in neuroticism reflected in self and informant report data. And so, neurotic behaviors in these personality tests are like anxiety and these kinds of like
depression,
overthinking,
self-doubt, negative feelings.
And I think that's super interesting. And this study is really long, and it goes into the different ways they analyze the data. And I think it was really well done. I think especially this like informant report is a really interesting way to try to, get better data essentially. Yeah. But if you read the text, they go into like a lot of details on how they, analyze the data from like baseline personality and like so people who are and like how purging affect like people who are higher in narcissism and all these different kinds of details that. And there's some really interesting graphs on there as well of like long-term changes. But, people were less neurotic like 3 months later, but they were also more open. And they're also more extroverted. And so, really shy, anxious people are opening up after these ayahuasca ceremonies. It's really beautiful, really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I will say I had a really hard time trying to read it. I'm like, this is so complicated. But I could tell they put so much work into it. And I'm like, okay, this is just, out of my league for now, unless I spent like multiple hours kind of reading through it, understanding what everything was. But it's really cool to see this kind of data, right? And like naturalistic use. In the beginning of the study, they're like, this ritualistic use is wildly understudied. Mm-hmm. And we really need to figure this out because it does hint at group use being helpful, but we kind of knew that from the ayahuasca world. I don't think we necessarily know that from, the mushroom world yet. Though I would love to know that. But, we have this speculation that group work could be really messy. And, I saw some of that personally. I've seen a lot of stuff go sideways in group psychedelic sessions of various kinds. And I don't know, Kyle, what do you think about the group topic as it relates to this study and then, more generally with other naturalistic use?
Yeah. I thought this study was really interesting just because, we haven't really seen too many studies come out about the naturalistic use of ayahuasca. I think one of our colleagues, Malin Utog, actually did a little bit of research, and it might be in her PhD thesis in her book exploring this. But, just what are some of the aspects here of an ayahuasca ceremony that could have benefit? And those are the things that they were exploring from, the live music with the Icaros, the container, so the group format, and even the role of the shaman and the purgative elements of like shaping the outcomes as well, and how all these factors are playing in. And, I guess these are also things that, how could Western psychotherapy maybe incorporate some of these aspects? And I think this is what's really interesting about this study is being able to look at these naturalistic kind of traditional ways, and are there these certain aspects of the ceremony that are actually helping to decrease neuroticism amongst participants? And how could we maybe apply some of that to Western, frameworks as well? But yeah, with the group work, I just really think it comes back to the container at times, right? I think like some of the stuff like we saw was just the container wasn't very strong. My group experience at Soltara was actually really profound and really wonderful. They held a really strong container there, and I found a lot of benefit in it actually. And coming from the breathwork world, that's one of our core concepts is group work, group container, and group process. And so just the bonding that happens, people coming together and sharing their struggles, being seen, being heard, being witnessed. I think that plays a huge role into somebody's healing. And yeah, again, we see that a lot in breath work where people come together and it's like, wow, you're a total stranger and you know more about my life than my family, my best friend, my lover, and it's like, just being able to connect so deeply through an experience, I think has some healing benefit there. But yeah, I think they said here some of the limitations was obviously the absence of a placebo control group or blinding protocol. So it'd be, I don't know how you would do that. Like, how do you blind a naturalistic setting for ayahuasca? I don't know.
Would you?
The fair move might be to compare different drugs and substances. Like, what does ibogaine look like? What does mushroom look like? What does, exclusively a 5-MeO DMT retreat look like? If those exist, I'm sure they do.
Definitely.
Yeah. So there's ways to do it. But yeah, like, I don't know. Maybe the control would be yoga, like a week-long yoga retreat, which has pretty substantial benefits, or Vipassana even.
Yeah, because you couldn't... Yeah, breathwork, meditation retreat, right? Because how would you create a placebo brew? You'd have to just make some really nasty tasting tea for someone to drink that doesn't have a psychedelic property, or so can you imagine?
Ipecac.
And then, being in the ceremony where like half the group isn't on the medicine and half is would totally kind of ruin the energy of the container, I imagine. Just not to drive the group home too hard, but I did find it really, really interesting. And listening to you talk just now about it, Kyle, and I've had my own group experiences where I didn't really know, I was just doing it to see what it was like, and actually being in the group of people was so helpful for me as someone who is shy and has struggled with social anxiety to just, to see other people go through it and to realize that I'm not the most damaged person in the room, right? Everyone thinks they're the most damaged person in the room. And actually we're all capable of picking ourselves up in a way, or, with a lot of work. They have a line in here that was literally the scientific way of explaining how I felt, which I thought was so powerful after my group experience. So under the subhead, it says, what can be learned from ayahuasca ceremony? It says, a communal group-based format has potential benefits of normalizing psychological struggles. That's exactly what I felt. Promoting empathy, bonding, and trust building as individuals vulnerably confront adversity, and affording constructive opportunities to enact new behavioral patterns of interpersonal relating. And it's true when you're in that space. From my experiences more with mushroom group ceremonies, but it's such a powerful, just seeing yourself from a new point of view within the group dynamic. It's a really powerful experience that I think can be really beneficial, especially for folks like me who are really neurotic. It really helped me see things from a new way and learn that all that I'm so damaged, you're I'm comparing myself to you all the time, thinking was not benefiting me at all. It's not serving me. It's making me worse, not better. And I really hope that, group work, in the right container. I know if it's an unheld container, it's chaotic, it's messy, it's possibly stressful and traumatizing in a way, but if we can have really trained facilitators, pick the group, really curate the group of people by getting to know them, I think that it could be really, really beneficial to so many people. So I look forward to it, really.
That's exactly why I like breathwork so much, is I get context. You know that scene in Fight Club where they're going into support groups, being kind of predatory?
Yeah.
I just love the sad stories. There's something about that, that's true. Palahniuk put it in there because there's a little bit of truth to that. It helps us to hear other sad stories. And in a lot of ways, culture is designed so that we don't hear bad stories, probably the way we used to. We get to see, Ellen and Good Morning America instead of what's really going on.
And Instagram culture where you only put your best self forward,
Yeah, those influencers are never hungover somehow. Bullshit.
It's so true. My favorite influencers are the ones who are really open about just when things are shitty, because that whole culture, and if we're constantly scrolling and only seeing people doing really positive, great stuff, it just makes us feel worse about when we're just normal people doing normal things. And so our culture, like it's set up in this weird way that it's constantly making us feel bad and that we're not doing enough. And so when we can all be really vulnerable and honest and open in a group, whether it's with psychedelics or not, it's so important. And this year's been so hard because there's so much less of that. So it's just great to have like scientific backing for these things we've all been experiencing. And so hopefully there'll be more of it and more money behind it. And it also is like a more accessible way to use psychedelics in a facilitated environment, because it's just going to be more affordable.
Was there like a short summary of this thing? Like a 1 or 2 sentence, like...
Yeah, here in the conclusion. So the conclusion says, the present study represented a relatively well-powered examination of personality change in relation to ayahuasca ceremony. Attending ayahuasca ceremony was associated with a medium-sized decrease in neuroticism, and our results pointed to predisposing and experiential factors that may potentiate personality change. Attributes of ayahuasca ceremony may be particularly powerful as a treatment for neuroticism / internalizing psychopathology, especially among individuals at elevated baselines. Furthermore, baseline personality, mystical type experiences, metacognitive reappraisal, and certain shamanic elements emerged as predictors of favorable personality change. And some of those shamanic elements were the purging elements, the Icaros and whatnot. And even kind of like the healing aspects of maybe the shaman coming over, pulling things out of you and whatnot. Right on.
Yeah, no, it was a really interesting study. I definitely encourage folks to go and look through it. They do go into like patterns and purging and how these things are actually really beneficial, like quantitatively proven. So really cool, really made me want to do an ayahuasca ceremony. Gonna have to wait a little while longer for that, but it's really exciting research. It's really great.
Awesome. Yeah, it's such a needed thing. There's so much, like, research funding should be prioritized for public benefit, right? And, what is NIDA studying? More propaganda on like methamphetamines and kind of just junk data that's not really totally fair for NIDA. I'm sure there's some amazing people in there, but, Carl Hart lays it out pretty clearly that they're doing some really nasty stuff with some pretty bad intentions and really bad after effects. What if it was actually there to help people and keep people safe? And Kyle, this goes into a little bit about like what Matt Johnson was talking about that I really appreciated in last night's Clubhouse with Dina.
Yeah.
But like, we need that safety data to help inform public safety. We should have research going out there, keep us safe and healthy and happy. So I'm glad this is going in the right direction. I think there's going to be a lot more research like this. And it's not either or. We need that clinical study too. Do we know if there's any clinical work going with ayahuasca? I think I heard of some European stuff that was underway a while ago.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, I'm sure there is. I mean, I remember seeing stuff. I just, off the top of my head, I need to go back in the research articles to look.
So I don't know that we named any of these authors. So Brandon Weiss, Joshua Miller, Nathan Carter, and W. Keith Campbell. And it was in Scientific Reports published on March 23, 2021. So good stuff. Really excited about it. And let's do more. more. All right, what's next?
Well, I guess I give a shout out also. There's another article that was released on the 25th of March in Frontiers in Pharmacology, Ethnopharmacology. I didn't get to read through this yet, so maybe we can revisit it on next week. But psychedelic communitas. So intersubjective experience during psychedelic group sessions predict enduring changes in psychological well-being and social connectedness. This is by Kettner, Rosas, Timmerman, Carhar-Harris, Roseman, and Kartner out of Imperial. And I guess I'll just, I could read the quick little background.
That sounds good.
So recent years have seen a resurgence of research on the potential of psychedelic substances to treat addictive and mood disorders. Historically and contemporarily, psychedelic studies have emphasized the importance of contextual elements set in setting and modulating acute drug effects and ultimately influencing long-term outcomes. Nevertheless, current small-scale clinical and laboratory studies have tended to bypass the ubiquitous contextual feature of naturalistic psychedelic use, its social dimension. This study introduces and psychometrically validates an adapted communitas scale, assessing acute relational experiences of perceived togetherness and shared humanity in order to investigate psychosocial mechanisms pertinent to psychedelic ceremonies and retreats. Maybe we can revisit this next week. But just on the same topic of naturalistic settings group work, I'm glad to see these two studies being put out there to really see this, because I think it's a big deal. Just as you said, Joe, with like Matt Johnson, the safety data. I mean, the reality is a lot of people are going to these retreats, and how can we really leverage these settings to really understand what's going on? How can we, collaborate with retreat centers to get data to really understand? And I'm glad like Imperial's doing that with Synthesis, and I know there's other retreat centers. I think I just saw something posted by Soltara. They were doing some research as well with the university. I don't think I read it, but I think I saw it come through an email. I'll have to dig that back up as well. But yeah, it's just exciting to see people get connected with these retreat centers to do research.
Absolutely. And, I keep thinking like group work, I feel like it's going to be even more important post-COVID than pre, because we've been all so isolated. We're so starved for human interaction, and isolation just isn't good for depression and anxiety. You can't. It's really hard to get out of your own heads. But within community, you can just see yourself more clearly. And I think that group work's going to be so important once it's safe, and I look forward to participating and to seeing more like research and money go into it, because this is one of the big ways I think we're going to help get out of this like really deep mental health rut that COVID has put our whole society into. And so it's exciting, and I'm very eager, but also still waiting to get back involved.
Right. Like, just to name a couple things, like combo, very little clinical data, very little safety data. And it's a little culty. I'm going to get some hate for saying all that stuff. I'm sorry. But, the way white folks are using it is a little iffy to me sometimes. I bet some folks are doing great with it. But I've seen some really questionable shit, and I get really uncomfortable, when I start seeing it. I know a particular physician who his wife told him he can do any drug but that one, any substance but combo, because you're having this like crazy anaphylactic kind of response in a way to these peptides flooding your system. So, I would say I'm in support of combo if and when we figure out a way not to be torturing toads, and we can do some real clinical safety trials. Like, let's do some phase 0 work before we start, scaling this to everybody needs, toad venom in their blood,
Now I keep seeing all this snake venom stuff like on social media too.
Somebody mentioned that in class the other day. Cobra. Someone's like using cobra venom. Like, what else have you heard?
Just in Mexico, I think there's people using, I just hear snake venom. That's all I know. I guess I got to do more reading before I talk about it publicly.
That was the first time I heard about it. I don't know too much about it. They just said it was really potent and powerful.
Just coming across my radar.
It'll kill you, so yeah.
Interesting.
So isn't a machete. I don't know what to make of that, right? Like, the traditions, there might be some precedent in some traditions around this. But I, can't really speak fairly about it because we don't know anything. But I can tell you it's a toxin that can kill people. Like, it goes in your blood and does and will kill folks. They shut, some American churches got in a lot of trouble around snake bites and snake charming and all this stuff. I don't know if you watched any of the, it was either like a Nat Geo or Vice on like snake charmers in India. And like people were missing a lot of appendages, fingers, arms, hands from snake bites. So I don't know what to do with that. Like, I don't want to sound like a colonizer, but I'm like, just be safe, everybody. Figure out the safest. If you're going to engage with cobra venom, probably talk to a doctor or two first. See what they want to say about it. Yeah. And do a little bit of work on how not to get killed.
You have to do some research too. I'll do some reading and we can bring some more stuff on the podcast because I'm just seeing this and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But I am epically curious. That's my whole deal, right? So I'll do a little more research we can share with you all in the future.
Let's say why it's related. So people have a inclination once they start kind of engaging in indigenous practice and religion, especially, like Shipibo styles, various Central and Southern American styles of religion, things are there. Like, why would the gods have put something there if it's not good for us? Everything here is medicine kind of deal. And, while that may be true to some regard, it's kind of hard to challenge that once you get steeped in those traditions. And it's a questionable thing. And this is definitely, in the psychedelic world, we were quite suggestible. So we might just pick up something and run with it. I'm guilty of it. Suspect you two might have been guilty of it at some point.
Totally.
All the time.
Yeah.
My first thought, though, is isn't that such a human-centric way of thinking that, like, everything's put on this planet to help us? Like, what if everything's actually put on this planet to help tarantulas? Like, why do we think that we're the center of
terrifying.
everything? I don't know. Sometimes I get, like, confused in that line of thinking. Like, are you sure? Are you really the center of the universe? I don't know.
That's a good point.
Anyway. It's all for the dolphins, you guys.
Yeah, right. Goodbye and thanks for all the fish. So we've got to frame these things and be careful because harm in the psychedelic world can get really publicized. Any harm whatsoever, and I'm guilty of trying to blow some stuff up too. Like, when I hear something and it's bad, I want to explode it, but then the mainstream could grab it and run with it in a negative direction. So we've got to be really careful. Well, all right. We might have beat this one to death. But I'm really excited about this next one here.
Yeah. And we have about 10 minutes or so.
Oh, God.
Just
Bummer.
Do a time check.
Can I do this in 10 minutes? Yeah.
Let's try. Let's try. All right. So I'll give it like the fastest high level, Michelle, and you fill in my back end. So this new 25-page report from the CIA was released. Vice did a big thing on it. Author was Thoby Campion, and former publisher at Motherboard at Vice. So really cool stuff. Title of the article, Found, page 25 of the CIA's Gateway Report on Astral Projection. This has ties to the Monroe Institute's kind of hemisync, brainwave synchronization technology. Is it binaural beats is kind of the fundamental thing there. It's really interesting shit. And this ties in a little bit with the men who stare at goats concept that was there a project around psychic training and psychic spies in, military intelligence complex. And looks like yes. And have either of you ever worked with any of the Monroe Institute CDs or apps or anything like that?
No.
Pretty interesting.
No, this is, really interesting.
They're not
but
cheap.
No, I have not, but interesting. They might have a press package. We'll have to look into
right.
it. I'd
like
love
this thing kind of turned into a sales
it.
pitch at the end, which is kind of weird. But it was like, I think that was part of the contingency on releasing the final page, right?
Yeah. So this page 25 has been missing. This is part of Stargate, and this I think it's 27-page report on
28,
astral,
I think.
Yeah, on astral projection has been declassified since 2003. But page 25 has been missing this whole time. And the article, so the reporter at Vice gets sent page 25. It was in the Monroe Institute archives this whole time, which is really interesting. And Monroe is also, he wrote a book in the 70s. He wrote a few, and one of them, Journeys Out of the Body, is the book that really coined the term out-of-body experience as well. So there's like a lot of really interesting ties in this whole story. But, you know, basically they believe that you can just access all this really interesting stuff when you alter your consciousness, which is exactly what psychedelic people have also been saying, like very adjacently, right? And so why page 25 was so important was it's like this source of all these conspiracy theories for like a decade, mostly because of how page 24 ends. And I'd love to read it. I think, so page 24 ended like this. This is so because in order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the absolute, capital A, must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. The hologram is a mirror image of the absolute in infinity, still exists outside time and space, but is one step removed from the absolute and is the actual agent of all creation, parentheses, all reality. And the eternal thought of concept of self, which results from this self-consciousness, serves the, and then it just ends. And people have been like ballistic about this, like thinking that, you know, all the answers of the universe exist on page 25. And so, you know, page 25, they're really dense. You can read it now on Vice in this article, and it is pretty mystical. And I do feel like it's really psychedelic adjacent. Like the absolute is this like, this all knowledge kind of like almost like God entity-like idea. And then page 25 also goes into left brain limitations. But I think most importantly for the psychedelic world, it goes into self-knowledge. It's too dense to read on the air, but, you know, the self-knowledge bit is basically like, you know, you have to know thyself before you can engage the rest of the world properly. And I really do feel like that's a very, like, psychedelic thing. Like, you take psychedelics to connect and learn and know thyself and get maybe in tune to, like, the source and these other kinds of words we like to use in the spiritual side of psychedelia before we can, you know, present in the rest of the world. And then this takes it further than that. Like, maybe you can know thyself, so then you can view thyself from outside and see the hologram of yourself, and that's how you astral project. I'm still kind of struggling to fully process how the gateway experience works. But the fact that the CIA was looking into this, giving money to the Monroe Institute and had people, like, I'm not actually sure if the CIA was giving money to the Monroe Institute, but they had a writer, you know, investigate all this Monroe Institute, binaural beats, change your brainwaves, alter your consciousness to maybe like remote view and astral project and all this stuff is insanely interesting. And maybe proof that the CIA is doing like other stuff that's like really wild and psychedelic, like maybe DMT, talking to entity aliens.
Yeah. I like this little part here on self-knowledge. No personality test or series of tests will ever replace the depth of fullness of the perception of self, which can be achieved when the mind alters its states of consciousness sufficiently to perceive the very hologram of itself, which has projected into the universe in its proper context as part of the universal hologram in a totally holistic and intuitive way. That's really fascinating.
So fascinating. Have you guys ever gone down the, like, we live in a hologram YouTube rabbit hole? Because
probably in the past.
And it's really confusing. I still don't properly get it. I need to take high school physics over, but it all has to do black holes and stuff. Maybe a reader or a listener will probably email us and explain it better. But it's super interesting. And if this, in this report, I wanted to there's one more bit of it I wanted to read. This was not in the this was not on page 25. And the rest of the doc that's just been out for people to read. There's a line in here about the practical applications of astral projection. And it says here, the Department of Defense's ambitions are made clear in the report's conclusion. McDonald suggests, this is from Vice, actually. This is, I'm quoting the Vice article. McDonald suggests that if the military were to experiment with astral projection, it could find practical application, but also noted that it should be participants should be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. Literally, preparing people to meet entities when they astral project. So I don't know. I think I have so many theories, but basically proof the government believes in entities, right? What do you guys think?
I think if anybody had experiences with these states of consciousness, I think it's hard to deny. I mean, we can take an analytical approach and, tear it apart and, I guess try to get to the core of what is this. But I think if all humans have this access to this other realm through breath work, through meditation, through psychedelics, through near-death experiences. And it's if you've ever had that experience, how do you deny it? Even if you are in that high-level government, I'm sure, it's ooh, you have this experience? Well, okay, how do we really research it more, keep it secret, so maybe the rest of the population doesn't know about it, right?
Or
it's kind of like something Robert Forte brought up last night in this clubhouse. He was talking about the sacredness of psychedelics and how he thought these things should be in private and sacred, kind of like the Eleusinian mysteries that went on for about 2,000 years, punishable by death to talk about your experience. And so kind of coming back to I guess some sort of gatekeeper, but this rites of passage to keep it very sacred and private instead of exposing it to everybody. And I don't know, yeah, maybe they're doing research and just trying to figure out what the hell's going on here. So they could create their nice little cult.
Or so they can harness this power too.
Right.
No, I'm joking about
the intention is directly military and intelligence related. It's all, they're very mission driven. It's not about understanding. As, I'm sure individuals in there are doing that kind of weird stuff, which is great. But Kyle, it's this discussion around sacred and vulgar. If you approach these things in a certain sacred way, it's a very different approach than a vulgar way. I'm going to use this as a weapon for kind of normal, mundane, vulgar means. And the very different results probably pop up based on the approach. One of the big things I came up with from this is it sounded a lot like some stuff I used to study way back related to the Golden Dawn and some other organizations in the occult, where the training profile was the very first thing you needed to establish was that you are not your body. And they used means a lot like this, classical means of astral projection, which, they hinted at existed in this article. There were classical means, but it was clouded with occult language and practices. But those language and practices gave it that more sacred container. Your body is this sacred vehicle for this little sliver of God that you are. And, self-exploring, kind of back to that infinite absolute concept they raised in the article a few times. So I think we're at time, Kyle.
Yeah, we are. We have to jump on a philosophy of
sucks to leave it with
conference. This is our page 25.
Right? I just want to say if folks want to learn more about this CIA research, John Ronson wrote a great book a few years ago called Men Who Stare at Goats. It's also a movie, but check out the nonfiction book. John Ronson's a great English journalist. The book is fascinating. A lot of remote viewing and other astral weird CIA research in there. So that's what I'll leave y'all with.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you both. May 20, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists kick off again. Learn more at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. I think that's it. Thank you both. More next time.
Thank you,
everybody.
Bye.